Have you ever had the experience of pulling into your driveway after a pretty long day and not being able to remember your commute or drive home? I remember when I was younger and sort of the first time that happened to me, more the feeling than the actual day, but the first time that happened to me, this feeling of being like, oh my gosh, like how did I get here? Was everything safe? Was I paying attention to my drive home? And it's really interesting. Science says that, when we do things that we kind of do repetitively, like driving to and from work or driving to and from school, that our brain doesn't necessarily use as much energy or resources. So it can kind of go into a sort of autopilot, and all of a sudden we're driving home, but we're not necessarily really present. We're just sort of moving our way home. We don't really remember it. It uses less resources in our brain. And I just think that that's really fascinating. In situations like this, it's like time can actually appear retrospectively. When you look back on it, it's like time can actually move faster. It's why when they talk about, as we get older, sometimes it feels like our time speeds up because we're not slowing down as much to rewrite new experiences in our brain. But then when you think about those days where you do have new experiences, time can actually, when you look back at them, it feels like time slowed down. So when you've gone and done something that maybe you haven't done before, you can remember more of the details of the day because you were sort of more present in those moments. Your brain was experiencing new things. And you get this also when you learn new things as well. When we took our kids to a place called the Othello Tunnels not too long ago, it's just outside of Vancouver, near Hope, BC. If you live anywhere in the area, I would highly recommend it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Amazing engineering, these old train tunnels. They're just fascinating. It's a beautiful spot. But what's really interesting to me is, I remember that day very clearly. There was a lot of new things that happened in that day with myself, my wife, and the kids. And so I was very, it's something that as I look back at retrospectively, it was a longer day. We experienced a lot together. And whereas I look at, yesterday or 2 days ago at work, and if you asked me what I did between the hours of 2 and 3, I probably couldn't tell you, right? Like, maybe looking at a calendar I could, but retrospectively looking back, those sort of moments in time are gone. But the other thing that I noticed during that day with the Othello Tunnels is not only we were experiencing something new, but I had that time with my family where I was very present in that time. Like I wasn't thinking about work or thinking about other things. I was very present there with my wife and kids. It was a new experience. It was a family adventure, and I wanted to be present and experience that with them. And what I learned through experiences like that is that one of the best things that I can do with this time that we're given, this seed of time, this incredible blessing, is to be present in time, to actually be present in my relationships and whatever it is that I'm working on or what I'm learning. It allows time to sort of slow down retrospectively, but it also allows me to pay more attention to how I'm using that time. In last week's discussion, we talked about the sowing principle framework, which I talk about in the book. And we started with this sort of first part of the framework, which I talk about what you sow. So we identified, identifying the blessings in our life. What do you have that you have the ability to sow? So we talked about our thoughts and our words, our time, our gifts, our skills, talents, and abilities. And then this week, I want to touch on the next part of the framework, which is how do we sow those seeds? And that's, this is talking about the tools and the toolbox that God's given us to take those seeds, those blessings, and apply them in our life. How do we put those seeds in the ground, so to speak? How do we take those seeds and actually get them in the ground so that they can move us towards God's will in our life, or what God's will is for us to kind of further his kingdom? And one of the things that I talk about in the sowing principle and in the how framework is showing up. And I like to say it not just showing up, because I think if you're anything like me, you can be physically present in a situation like driving home from work, but not actually showing up with intentionality. So not necessarily mentally engaged in the process of driving home from work. And that time is actually sort of being lost to me almost in a way. Because if I'm not showing up with intentionality, or I'm allowing myself to be distracted, which is so common today, carrying around these smartphones. I've talked about this before, but I get so easily distracted by everything going on around me that I might not be showing up in those moments or in my time with intentionality. So I'm not sowing that seed with intentionality. So what I really want to encourage you with today is to show up with intentionality, to be present, talking about our relationships, being present in our relationships and our conversations with, our spouse, our children, and our coworkers, and, key friends. How do we not allow ourselves to be distracted? How do we show up in our work and actually be there with intention and with purpose? How do we show up in meetings and actually be present and contributing to the whatever it is, the discussion that's going on? Take that, and then it will take that seed and watch how it grows when you show up with intentionality, how your relationships grow and they flourish. It's something that I continually need to work on, but it's amazing when, in those situations where I've looked back and sown seeds of intentionality of my time, how I can watch and see that grow and flourish. Other tools that I talk about that are in our toolbox that I'm not really going to dive into, but just briefly touch on today. I talk a lot about our habits. Our habits of being able to learn how to take a habit and use that as a tool to sow a seed with intentionality and consistency, and how those habits can really build out incredible things in our lives. But it's just a tool. It's a tool in a toolbox. The habit isn't an end unto itself, but a habit is a tool that you can use. And then there's our rituals, when things like habits become even more ingrained in us and they become a part of our identity. And I talk about those as being like our rituals in our life, and they actually become a part of who you are. All these things are tools in your toolbox that can help take those seeds, put them in the ground towards what God's calling you to and towards God's call and vision in your life. So if you think back to the conversation that we had last week, I want you to pause for a second and think about, what are the seeds that you have available to sow? We talked about your words. We talked about your thoughts, your time, your gifts, the things that God's given you, the gifts, talents, and abilities that God's given you. So once you've identified those, now when I talk about showing up with intentionality, how can you take each of those gifts and sow them with intentionality? How can you intentionally sow your time in relationships, which we've kind of touched on? How can you intentionally sow your thoughts? How can we've talked about in previous videos, you can't have two thoughts at the same time. So if you can take control of your thoughts and sow those thoughts with intentionality, what does that look like for you? What are the things that you need to be telling yourself? And what about your words? Not just your words to other people, but also the words that you say to yourself. What do you say out loud to yourself when you make a mistake? How are you sowing into yourself, building up your self-image, building up the image that God wants you to have of yourself as you go forward to be able to carry out his vision? And then we talk about your gifts and your talents and your abilities and your skills. How can you show up with intentionality in those moments where you're practicing, or where you're honing your craft, or where you're learning something new, or putting yourself out there to serve your community? How can we show up with intentionality in those moments? I have a very specific memory from this past summer. I was at the park across the street from our house with my kids. We're playing. It was an absolutely beautiful day, gorgeous sunshine. And I just have this very imprinted memory. It's like a video. I can play it at any time. It's my youngest. She's running across the playground, just laughing, pure joy. And I'm chasing her. And she's, just saying, "Daddy, come play." And I just remember pausing in that moment and being like, I want to remember this forever, because it was just one of those incredible moments as a father. She's so filled with joy. The whole moment was filled with joy. Beautiful sunny day. And I know that I remember it not because I paused and I said it that I wanted to, but also because I was there. I was very present. It was somewhere that we go all the time. So it's an easy place for me to go and to be distracted by other things. By, they can play on the playground and I can, check my emails or whatever it is that I do. But for some reason, in that particular day, in that particular moment, I was able to be fully present. And I look at it as one of my favorite memories of the summer, because I was able to show up there with intentionality and be present. There were many beautiful sunny days. There was many days that we went to the park this summer, but why that day? Why was I able to cement that day in my memory, that I can recall it and look back on it with such fondness and joy? It's because I was there and I was present. If I'd been checking emails, I might have missed it. And there were many days where I did that, where I was there and I was, checking my emails or doing what I needed to get done, which we all do. But when we can pause, when we can slow down, it actually allows us to take our brain out of those autopilot situations, or those situations where maybe we don't think that we need to be fully present, and actually create a memory, write something new, allow our brain to experience something new. And I hope that I can encourage you today to take it into your life, take it into your relationships, take it into your week, and create some of those moments this week where you're intentionally present, where you create new memories, new experiences, new challenges, things that you get to experience in life. Thank you so much for being willing to continue to learn about the sowing principle. I hope that it uplifts and encourages you. I'm super excited. This Friday, the 19th, the sowing principle is going to be available on Amazon. I'll have a link for you as soon as I have that we'll be able to include in the show notes. Have an absolutely awesome rest of your day, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.